take it over?
Yeah,
And
I'll just get started since we're a little behind.
yeah,
So as we were kind of having a broad discussion about public access, I'm glad that we actually had that just to kind of frame what public access is. I think that'll make it helpful here as we move through some slides. So to get started, before we actually look at some of this functionality that we've added, excuse me, and also take a look at our roadmap, since we are going to get into some roadmap items, I do just want to put our safe harbor statement out there. We're not committing to delivering any of the items on the roadmap, and they shouldn't be used in purchasing decisions. Now, as we were kind of discussing the ability to apply for permits through public access, one of the new items that we added builds off existing functionality where users, if I'm that person putting up a fence in my backyard, or if I'm a contractor, whoever I am, they could access reports from within the public access interface. And this is really helpful, right? If you want to get an inspection card, print off your building permit, maybe even print your certificate of occupancy, whatever it is, it's useful functionality. And we already had that as a foundation, but we wanted to expand on it because we received a lot of feedback that, hey, it's great that I can print my inspection card, but at previous versions, it was a one-to-one relationship. I could only print one report from one of my case templates. And so, yeah, I could print that inspection card, but maybe I couldn't print my building permit. I couldn't print my fee receipt or my fee summary page. And so what we wanted to do, and what we've done at 5.2, is we've added the ability for users to access multiple reports from any given case template. And again, for those of us who maybe haven't experienced public access or PLL before, a case template is basically just our general work activity for within the application. And for PLL, this can range from what we have here, which is a residential new single family permit, to a code enforcement case, a business license, a right-of-way permit, really whatever it is that you're using PLL for. And just kind of a tip here that I wanted to go as we kind of walk through this is kind of show that PLL admin, excuse me, which is the configuration piece for PLL, maybe isn't as scary as it seems. I remember 6 years ago when I started working with PLL, I'd only seen AMS functionality in Designer, and so PLL admin was kind of an eye-opening experience, but I promise you it's not that scary. And so to allow for multiple reports, for instance, this is all you have to do. You come into PLL admin, you edit your case template, you click that add delete reports button, and then here I can select multiple reports that I'd like to be accessible on the case. And from an end user perspective, nothing has really changed. Okay, so here's my PLL case that we see in public access, right? I'm here on a residential new single family permit, and I can see my actions drop down. And from there, I can do a series of things. I can schedule inspections, create new cases, or I can get one of those reports. And now, instead of just automatically opening that one report, I can select any reports that have been mapped against that template, and I can print as many as I'd like. So I can print that inspection card while I print my permit, while I print my fee summary, whatever I'd like, just giving the user a little bit more flexibility, and also giving administration more flexibility because this is template specific. So if there's reports that don't make sense to be printed from a business license, you can hide those from those case templates. Also, during the intake process, right, when you're applying for a permit, if we imagine a paper permit, there's typically a section for people information. Who's the applicant for this case? Who's the property owner at that location? Who's the architect? Whatever it may be. Previously, you were limited to roles, right? That contact, architect, those are all what we call people roles. You were limited to what was defined against the case template during the intake process. So if you wanted to add information, say for a contact, but that wasn't defined against the template, you weren't able to do so. And we wanted to provide some more flexibility there as well. So here, again, really simple configuration while also giving us some flexibility. We just have two checkboxes that I've highlighted here in PL admin. One for the ability to manually add people during case create, and one for the ability to manually add people after a case has been created. You check those boxes to unlock this functionality. And importantly, right, this is also built off a security role. So if you don't want your basic end users to be able to do this, you leave those boxes unchecked and they're kind of locked to what they previously could do. And now again, getting a look at our intake process here, we're going out, filling our application in, and we see those previously defined roles. We see our applicant, our contact, and our property owner, which we were previously limited to those roles to provide that information. With the check of that box for during intake, we've added this button to add a person, and I'll play this video and show the functionality. It's really simple, it's easy to use. I come in, I realize maybe I want to add my land developer, so I click this add person button, and I can see all my defined roles, and I can indicate what it is that I'd like to add to this case. So those are just all our defined roles against the database. And importantly too, any of these that have required fields built against them, so we can set some requirements for these fields, for instance, to require the email address when I'm filling out this case. If there's required fields against the role that I'm adding manually, those will carry through as well. So I can't bypass that requirement, right? I'm always going to be required to provide those fields. That was kind of our first checkbox for adding people during create. And I'll skip this video ahead because I think it was a bit slow that day. But we also have the ability to add people after the case has been created. So now I've created my case, but maybe I remember, oh, I'd like to add another contact, or I'd like to add another architect if maybe, you know, some things have changed hands and I just want that information as well. I can go through, click the add person button, and provide that information in a little bit more ad hoc of a way, which provides some serious flexibility. Now in the description of the presentation too, we talked about creating cases, right? And how I wanted to take a look at that. We saw a little bit when we just walked through adding people to a case, but you can also create child cases. So if you have a commercial new building and you want to add maybe a solar panel permit, you can do this through public access. Now, previously, this was a little bit limited in its scope. If you went to create a child case from a parent, you were locked into the same case type as the parent. For instance, we're going to go ahead and look at our residential new single family permit again. And prior to 5.2, if I clicked create a child case, I would automatically create another new single family permit, which maybe for a lot of our users didn't make the most sense. So now at 5.2, you can actually select the child case type you'd like to create. So you can go ahead and indicate, again, through PL admin here, really simple setup. I go to my public site section, highlighted there on my template. Down there with the add and delete child templates, I can determine what cases I want to be created from this particular parent. Not only does this give some flexibility, but again, you can kind of control what applications come in. So instead of maybe having a code enforcement case come in against a business license or a right-of-way permit, if that doesn't make sense, you can prevent that from happening by simply indicating which permits you want to allow. And again, the functionality really doesn't change from an end user perspective. I come to in review, or I should say my actions drop down. I pick create a new case from current, and we'll see during this process that filtering is already taking place. I can't even see my code enforcement cases. I can't even see commercial new builds because I've defined against the template to only allow for residential pool and solar permits to be created against this new single family home. And then you go ahead and create that application. I'm going to speed up a little bit, but if we want to talk about this more in depth, absolutely reach out to any of us and we can put something together, but there's just a few other items that I want to cover. Another piece of feedback we've received, currently within public access, users can see if a comment has been left against a PLL task. Now this could be a building review, an electrical inspection, anything of that nature. So maybe an electrical inspection fails because the GFCI outlet in the bathroom didn't pass its reset test. An inspector could indicate that through mobile or through Cityworks Respond like we see here, and that comment would be available for the end user within public access. We got some great feedback on this. People like this functionality, but they also want it available for case level comments. And again, at Cityworks Public Access 5.2, we've allowed for this functionality. Now you also do need to use Cityworks Respond, as we'll see here. So we'll go in and we'll add a comment through Respond. This is just our PLL case. And we just built in a checkbox that says show in public access. So if I want this comment visible, I can check that box, add my comment, maybe indicating that the application has been received. And then through public access, I'll be able to view and interact with that comment. Now it also gives us some flexibility, right? I can just leave that box unchecked and then any internal comments won't be available through public access. Now I'll just refresh this page here and we'll see that comment along with the date. Now, kind of in a second iteration of this, we want to allow the public users from this interface that we see here to maybe comment back to the internal staff. Right now, it's only internal staff to the public, but we'd like it to go both ways. And so we'll work on that in the future. And I kind of got into this a little bit before we were able to share my screen. So we do have support for Express Bill Pay now, which is really, really exciting. At 5.2, we also have the ability to bypass address matching. And I think internally we all understand what that means, but to explain it for maybe those who don't have public access experience, a lot of our public access users are creating cases against brand new land that's maybe been unplatted, right? It's not even brought into the GIS yet. It's a brand new subdivision. So they go in, they punch in their address of 123 Gita, and they get a message prior to 5.2 that says, hey, this isn't a valid address, and then a few suggestions of valid addresses that they can select. This is kind of a circular problem, right? I'm not creating at one of these fake addresses. I know where I'm creating this case. I know where I'm building this house. So how do we get around this? Previously you couldn't, but now with the setting in the configuration files, you can add a button that basically asks the applicant, are you sure? Are you sure you want to use this address that doesn't quite exist yet? And then they can go through and create that application anyways. Excuse me. On the back end, we also made our related document permissions line up a little bit more with their definition in the security role. So security roles are really, really extensive. I think there's over 1,100 different controls within each security role. And specifically, there are 6 or 7 for related documents, being able to add them, delete them, view them. And there was kind of a distinction between public access related document permissions and internal related document permissions prior to 5.2. We've made that line up. So now if an internal person cannot view or delete an attachment, that would be the same thing for an external user. So that was a little bit of a sprint, and I'm hoping that we'll have some time to either catch up after this or take a deeper dive maybe with some questions. But I do want to, as we have about 5 minutes left, just get into our general roadmap discussion for things we'd like to do. And I hope your eyes don't glaze over with this bulleted list, right? It's kind of like, oh, well, what is this? It's not very flashy, but I think that more just speaks to the amount of items that we want to add to public access. We want to make public access the best application it can be, and a lot of the feedback we've had is reflected on our roadmap. First and foremost, and again, Gabriella can attest to all this as well as I can, we want to improve our contractor functionality within public access. And this is pretty wide ranging, right? It's a relatively broad enhancement, but some end user functionality that we'd like to eventually see is the ability for a contractor to add a subcontractor to a case. If I'm a general contractor putting up a shopping center, I'm probably not going to do all the electrical work myself. So I want Earl Electric to be able to see and interact with this case and schedule inspections, that sort of thing. So being able to add that subcontractor and have that visibility. Also being able to manage who all belongs to a contracting organization. If currently I log in as Cityworks Contracting, I'm the only Cityworks Contracting login. But maybe there are 10 other people who work at Cityworks Contracting with me, and they should all be able to see and interact with those cases as well, whereas currently there's a little bit of a problem there. And so we're working on addressing that, and even just building almost a contractor administrative module within public access. So as a contractor, owner of a contracting agency, I can indicate if Carl Contractor still works for me, or maybe Cindy Contractor retired, so I'm going to take her out of my list and she'll no longer be able to see our cases within public access. So some really wide-ranging things there that we want to pursue as we improve our contractor functionality. We also really want to work on guided access. So for those of us who attended the last Cityworks conference in 2019, Greenwood, Indiana was on the main stage, and they showed kind of this dockable quarter of the screen that had tips, right? If you needed some advice on how to get through a step in the permitting process, maybe what you all need to collect, maybe for some of the functionality that didn't make sense to standard end users, they could provide some built-in tips per page of the application process. And we want to allow this out of the box as well, exposing all the pages within public access and having administratively defined tooltips. So for instance, when you need to upload some documents, we can have some tooltips there saying, hey, your site plans need to be 9 by 12, or your site plans need to be 11.5 by 10, whatever it is, kind of some specific information that's more flexible than our current interface. And we also, as we maybe cruise through, we want additional payment providers always, which is why we're excited to have Express Bill Pay. We want the ability to kick off a business license renewal from public access. We want to improve our comment engine, like I was saying, where we can have some two-way interaction instead of just internal staff exposing comments to the public. We want it to go back and forth. The ability to attach assets in maybe a more intuitive way. Right now, you can attach an asset to a case in public access, but you just have to click a point on the map and that grabs the asset. And once you know that, I think it's a pretty straightforward process, but maybe to get people who aren't too familiar with that process or who aren't too familiar with using a map to be able to select and expand kind of our selection tools within the map there as we attach assets. So that was admittedly a sprint. I'm thankful that everybody stuck with us, right? And hopefully this was some good information. And at the very least, let me put this up. So at the very least, I'll be around obviously all day today and tomorrow. Same with Kara and Gabriella. And if we want to talk about some of these things, hopefully they piqued your interest. And if we want to go into a little bit more depth, that's what we're here for, and we'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. Sorry for all the technical difficulties, but we're hoping that this was useful. And please do reach out to us if you want to have an additional, more in-depth conversation as to where we're heading with public access. We thank you so much for hanging in there, and we look forward to having you attend the other sessions. Kara's going to have another session coming up soon here as well, and Dan will be having another session coming up as well. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing you in other sessions.